to anyone watching these Kaijudo videos. Today I'm going to be doing another duel video, of course, this time with the uh, Queen Kalima deck that I profiled on the channel. Couple changes I believe I made. I ended up cutting the one Underworld Stalker and a third Targusher for two of these Lurking Skullcutters, just to lower the curve a little bit, which I think is something I touched on in that deck profile anyways. And the other card I added was this Baelgor, Accursed Dragon. I just took out the Andromeda just to try this as another big thing. I think it's a cool card. It has a lot of power to it, especially when this deck is playing so low on shields. I figured maybe sometimes it might be better than Andromeda just to have this card that can just blow up all your opponent's shields instead. And a fair amount of the time you have a decent number of creatures that you've kind of developed over the stages of the game as it's progressed that you can kind of beat maybe one shield blast, maybe two shield blasts coming out of your opponent's shields, and it can kind of give you a way to, rather than try to aim to stabilize somehow in these really tricky scenarios, you can just try to steal a game with this dragon. So it remains to be seen how actually effective this card is, or if it's good. It's not really a card I've played too much with yet, at least especially not in this deck, but I don't know, I think it has potential and I want to give it a shot. And yeah, with that said, we'll hop into the match that I have. This match being between myself and K-Rick from the Rangers Dojo Discord, and of course in this match he's going to be playing what looks like a Light Nature Megabug deck. So with all that said, we'll jump into the game. I believe he's starting this game. I think he won the die roll and chose to go first, which makes sense. And yeah, from his perspective, when you're looking at the turn 1 mana choice, I think I like I like Salvation Reckoner. Holding the Stratus Beetle makes sense because if you draw some other nature card, you may not want to put the Hive Queen in mana, but if you draw some other nature card, you can play that and play the in mana and play the Stratus Beetle. From my perspective, obviously the Stingwing mana choice here is pretty straightforward. I'm going to need to put one of these in mana to cast the other if I want to. And here he draws Manatic, and he has a choice if he wants to play maybe this Hive Queen in mana, play this Stratus Beetle, and then maybe curve into Manatic or Swordhorn. And he elects to keep the Hive Queen and put this Stratus Beetle in mana. Which is a play I kind of like, for sure. I think that's decent. Or it's pretty solid. In hindsight, I mean, it's not really useful to talk about hindsight. Yeah, we'll continue on. I was gonna say like it could have been better to lead with his Swordhorn, so that on turn 2 you complete the Stratus Beetle into Manatic and then develop the Megabug side. But given that you didn't have this Manatic, you didn't know you had a 3-drop, it makes way more sense to do what he did and play this Swordhorn. So yeah, the hindsight there is completely useless. And from my perspective, I elected to throw this Gloomhollow in mana and keep the Screeching, which I think is probably a mistake. I'm not maybe super likely to cast this Gloomhollow throughout the game anyways, but the Screeching is looking even less likely because, I mean, the fact that he managed a Stratus Beetle, didn't play a 2-drop, if he had another nature 2-drop ready to go, he would have put the Stratus Beetle in mana turn 1, or I don't know, it feels like there's so few combinations of cards he could have the way he sequenced that would involve him having like some 2-drop that I can point this at. So I think it would have been better. This card would be something that could come up a little more. Blockers aren't too effective in the matchup, and I don't think really dumping your hand out as blockers against like a Blinder Beetle Prime deck is really the most effective strategy. But I think it still had a little more application than this. I think the other mistake I made on this turn for sure was not playing the Stingwing. I mean, it's not 100% a mistake. Given that he hasn't really played anything that I need to contest, I'm not really sure. And I think something I tend to do maybe a little bit too often is keep cards in my hand to maintain the sort of flexibility and the options that I have within my hand and what gets to go in mana, what I actually play. But I think the problem is I probably want this Stingwing in play at some point in the game, and I'm not gonna if because I didn't cast it on turn 2, I'm not gonna be able to cast it on turn 3 because I'm gonna be mesmerizing. I'm gonna be bone blazing on 4, so this card won't be able to come down until like turn 5 or 6. And if it were just in play on turn 2, I wouldn't have to worry about finding some other place to put it in play. So that's kind of a place where I just spewed away 2 mana when I probably should have spent it on this Stingwing. Um, that's not certain, especially given that he's not playing like a 2-drop that's attacking my shields and maybe giving me some extra cards, like, or putting any pressure on me. It may not be a mistake. I think it's hard to say like how effective or how necessary it is that I actually keep that Stingwing. You could even make a case that if I was willing to throw this Gloom Hollow in mana, I should have thrown this second Stingwing in mana and kept the Gloom Hollow in my hand, just because then I wouldn't have to worry about finding a way to sequence in this multi-civ into my mana drops at some point. If I did want to maintain the flexibility of having a card that might be a blocker I want to commit to the battlefield, or might be a mana I want to commit to my mana zone, it may have been better to keep the untapped card. But that said, I think Stingwing is a little bit better of a blocker in the matchup. From his perspective, plays a Manitic, finds a Manitic. Super strong. Just one of the ways that makes it really hard for me to kind of grind him down out of resources is the Megabug package adds a whole layer of card advantage with the Manitics, the Broodmothers, even the Hive Queens. So finding another Manitic is something perfectly strong for him. Here, I would probably just elect to put, the Screeching in mana, and I cast the Mesmerize. And this is a tricky decision in terms of what I elect to choose. It's pretty tough to decide. You have, I think my thought process overall, Manitic is really scary because it's another card, again, that generates more resources. I don't really want him to be able to dig to a Broodmother and sort of get even more cards that way. That's something I'm really scared of. I'm not too worried about either Swordhorn or Blinder Beetle Prime. Because if he plays the Swordhorn, I can just Bone Blades and strand this Blinder Beetle Prime anyways. I'm worried about the Hive Queen and the Manitic that kind of generate extra cards. I think probably in hindsight, I think what I end up taking is the Hive Queen, I believe. Just because it's like the big powerful card I'm scared of, and I can just I felt like I may not be able to answer both of these bait cards, so I'd rather just deal with the Hive Queen, whereas I can answer the bait from this. The problem is, again, like, these Manitics just generate so much extra resources, and if I could just Mesmerize the Manitic and then Bone Blades the other Manitic, even if he plays this Swordhorn, and I felt like maybe I was overvaluing the need to strand the Blinder Beetle Prime, when it's just, I could have just aimed my resources at these Manitics instead, and then that leaves me the upside of kind of, it doesn't give him the opportunity to dig for even more powerful card advantage Megabugs. And I mean, if I do take him down that road, then all of a sudden, like, maybe if this turn he were to play the Swordhorn and then I Bone Blades his Manitic and he untaps, and then what's he going to do? Is he really going to just kind of put this Blinder Beetle Prime on his Swordhorn on a dry board? And then what if he ships in for 2 shields and then one of them ends up being a Terror Pit and he loses everything he has? So I think just solving the Manitics, attacking both of those may have been better than, and it also really just forces him down the road of Swordhorn. Whereas if I had Mesmerized the Hive Queen, he's not necessarily guaranteed to be even casting the Swordhorn that I can strand the Blinder Beetle Prime in his hand for. So I think I was thinking a little bit too much about how this is a good card and trying to hedge my bets towards kind of like stifling the Enforcer package, when I should have just focused. I don't know exactly my thought process there. I think in hindsight it was probably best to take this Manitic, but he ends up just drawing the third Manitic anyways, and he actually throws one in mana, which kind of made me think like he's deciding to switch directions to this Enforcer package, which is kind of what I was hoping, and I was happy to see that mana tick go down. But little did I know that he actually had the third. But he opts to play this. I think I probably prefer him playing the second mana tick there anyways, which is another problem with my play is like the better decision would have probably just been to play the sword horn instead of the mana tick, or the mana tick instead of the sword horn. So kind of mesmerizing the Hive Queen with the hopes that he plays the sword horn that I can Bone Blades doesn't make really a ton of sense when you consider that it would probably be best for him to just cast that second mana tick and dig for a Broodmother, which I think was the better play. He ended up not making the play, and then I kind of Bone Blades this sword horn. But and now I was feeling pretty happy because I kind of ran him out of the Megabugs as well as the Enforcers, so I thought, but of course he has the mana ticks there. And what does he find? I believe he finds a Homunculon, if I remember correctly. Yes. So now he's got a pretty decent position here, a bunch of strong cards. And my cards, by comparison, are pretty weak, and I have no board. So he chooses to break, which I don't mind. Just putting the pressure on. He's got enough powerful backups. It's not super likely that I am able to deal with both of these creatures, so he's pretty effective, or pretty likely to actually drop this Hive Queen. So from my perspective, I could Bone Blades one of these mana ticks, which may be the best play. I end up trying to Spire Puppet, which isn't the best in the face of the Homunculon. Obviously, playing these Skullcutters isn't going to be super great either in the face of Homunculon. I could play Skullcutter plus Stingwing, which is maybe a little better because it might make the board tend to simplify the board state, and maybe that would have been better against like what his exact hand is, but I end up Spire Puppeting, which is kind of weak if I miss the Homunculon. But given that his second card is Hive Queen, if I could spike that out of his hand, it's actually not that bad for me. I mean, I'd rather hit that card than the Homunculon. So, I mean, it's tricky. He's got two really strong cards in his hand. And it may have been better to play Stingwing plus Skullcutter against what his hand ended up actually being. Just because it leaves me with a little bit more safety, but actually, maybe not even. Like, the Hive Queen's just going to be so devastating when it lands. Oh, I believe I can speed it up a little bit. I think there was just a little delay on the randomization of the hand. Ends up hitting the Homunculon, which from my perspective looks pretty solid, but from he's probably pretty pumped about that. And he draws the untapped mana as well, which is good for him, and gets to evolve into Hive Queen. And now I think this ends up being, I think, one of the two deciding moments of this game where he elects to attack with this mana tick first, as opposed to the Hive Queen, which I can only assume. I can only assume the reasoning for this is because it sort of follows like the kind of old school or the traditional logic of when you want to try to break as many shields as you can, you should attack, or like you're going for game or whatever, you want to attack with your below 4 drops first, or so that it makes it more likely, because all the Bone Blades in the later shields will be dead. In this case, though, that's really for when you're trying to maximizing the number of shields you can break. In this case, you're not really trying to maximize the number of shields you want to break. Your goal is not to break all three of these shields. Your goal is to attack and resolve the effect of this Hive Queen. And then in doing so, you're going to guarantee 2 breaks. So you're really wanting to build up that wide board, get a card back out of the Hive Queen. It's really important that that happens, and that's kind of like the first priority, is to put on some pressure while building up that board. You don't need to maximize your ability to break every shield. And it's actually a small play, but he ends up getting extremely hard punished because I have the Terror Pit, which is pretty much the one card that can punish him, and it had to be exactly that shield. So that's kind of a bad break for him, but I think it was a mistake to attack with that Hive Queen first because, again, like let's say for instance, if he did attack with the Hive Queen first, broke the Terror Pit and this other card, that Terror Pit would have likely pointed at the Hive Queen anyways, right? And he still probably would have got that third break if he wanted it. So I think for that reason, I mean, yeah, it should, and then in that case, he would have also been up the extra card that he would have gotten. And if it was something like a Broodmother, like it would have been just absurd. So again, like you're not really needing to maximize your ability to break every one of these shields or play to the percentage of breaking all of these shields. You just really want to play to the ability to maximize like the board you're building up and just guaranteeing you get that Hive Queen. Because even though it's a super small percentage chance that you don't get that Hive Queen attack, I think it's worth it's worth playing towards the guarantee that Hive Queen procs, as opposed to playing towards like maybe or hedging towards like trying to break all 3 shields. But yeah, a tricky spot, but one where he ends up getting punished, and I think it gives me a little bit of the reprieve that I need. So I just build up my board, and he draws probably the best card in his deck to draw, which is Broodmother. Getting 2 fresh new cards. I mean, this is why the card's so good. And so if this Kalima deck really has a tough time, and when you see like these mid-rangey decks with Anjak and Broodmother and Manatic and all these Hive Queens that generate extra resources, it's really tough to deal with those. So from my perspective here, throw down that. I'm just probably going to Spire Puppet. Both his cards, again, it's another situation where both cards are good. I was really scared of this Anjak because it just almost represented this like kind of insurmountable obstacle. But I believe I got lucky again, spike the Anjak, and get to keep playing. So he draws a Sasha. This card is going to be really powerful. Just an absurdly difficult card to deal with. So he ends up playing the bait creature for it. And this makes sense with the Sasha in hand as well. Just clearing the blocker, even if I'm able to trade off this Skull Cutter for the Broodmother, just getting out of the blocker out of the way for Sasha to come in at these last 2 shields is really strong for him. Here we go. So on my turn, draw, and it's a Trox. So Trox is a pretty decent card to have here. I can just clear both of his creatures and strand him with that Sasha now in his hand. Just thinking a little bit about what I want to do. I end up making the play, kill both, and now I kind of have to decide, and I decide to attack a shield, and I'm still not sure about this play. I kind of like answer the board, and I just wanted to turn the corner as quickly as possible. He only has like 6 shield blasts, maybe. Like he has the Crick Ants as well, but I mean Crick Ants are relevant, but he has like the only defensive blasts he has are probably the 3 Reckoners and 3 Arbiters, and I really want to just kind of try to leverage this position and try to turn the corner. Ideally, kill him over the next couple turns if I can chip in for a shield or 2, chip in for 2 shields now, and then maybe even win the game the next turn. That's kind of what I want to aim for. I'm really not sure, and I end up getting kind of punished as well by this. I believe it's going to be an Arbiter that comes down. Yeah, which taps my stuff, and knowing he has Sasha, that's kind of even more embarrassing of an attack now in hindsight. But it might still be correct just to try to turn the corner there. Like, I'm so far away of having much to do, so probably for the best that I just aimed to go for game there. And so he's just deciding whether or not to play this Blinder Beetle on mana, I guess. He could make the play of just evolving, chipping in for my shields, and then... But I don't think that plays that good. You should just evolve with Sasha and attack. But I think this was his second mistake this match. I believe he elects to attack the Trox instead of my shields, which I don't think you should do. I mean, he's not in any threat of dying. Even if he were under threat of me like being able to lethal him, the Sasha's ability prevents him from being able to be killed, because it could just, and his deck's all creatures, so he's just going to be able to kind of prevent his shields from being broken if he wants to. And it's just much better to just have this invincible creature go for my last 2 shields. All I can really do about that is maybe hope to develop a few blockers that can maybe chump it the next turn. But then I end up in just this terrible position where he gets to untap with the Sasha. Whatever blocker I do have is kind of doomed to the Sasha. And then from there, I'm just so hooped by any other shield blast he might have. Like, even if it's something like a kraken, if I ever try to chip in for a shields over a couple turns, I'm always just going to be dead to a shield blast. So getting me down to 0 shields is really important, and it just leaves him so favored. Like, personally, I know I've already been through, I think, like 3 blockers, and I only have, I believe, 6. So just putting me to 0 shields is incredibly threatening, because I'm forced to find a blocker for this Sasha next turn. And beyond that, it makes it really difficult to mount a comeback when every card he draws is going to be a creature that requires another answer, and I'd just be so far behind. But I end up choosing to go for shields again. I'm just getting really aggressive. I think my reasoning behind this, just breaking 1 shield, was, I think, given that I drew the Kalima, my idea was, if I can get him to 3 shields, then if he elects not to make this trade, like if he elects to just attack my shields now instead of this Spire Puppet, and I get to make an attack with Kalima at some point, like the 3 shields can be broken by Kalima, and then I can beat a Salvation Reckoner. I wouldn't be able to beat a second Arbiter, but I'm probably not going to be beating a second Arbiter this game. That would require too much of a board to build up, and a little bit too much time to do that. But I could for sure maybe find a spot where I can beat at least like a Salvation Reckoner when I can leverage this Kalima by getting him down to 4 shields. Also, even if I do break like a Shield Blast now, it would be pretty unlikely with just a 1 shield being broken. And even then, I still have an out with maybe a second Terror Pit in shields. But the bigger thing too is I'm not too worried about giving him the extra card in hand right now, because I mean, it's not super likely with 3 Blinder Beetle Primes down and also given that I think he's been through an Anjak, that he's able to assemble exactly like some like maybe Stratus Beetle plus Anjak to try and kill me. That's not super likely, and with the Kalima being able to clear probably at least 2 creatures, maybe 3, whatever board he tries to develop this following turn, I can just clear with Kalima anyways. So the extra resource I give him off this 1 shield break isn't going to amount to much. And it also gets him down to that clean number of 3 that I want him at. So that I can, even if he answers this card, I can game him through no shield blast after I clear his board. or I can game him through a Salvation Reckoner if he tries to go for my shields this turn. So I'm kind of aiming for win in like the 2 turns after this. And so he draws an Arbiter, which is not a super strong card for him. I think a perfect world he would have drawn like 2 creatures he could dump out. But he doesn't. He hits just Sasha, and he does elect to break my shields. And okay. So now the play, pretty straightforward. I'm just gonna mark, play Kalima. I feel like maybe he could be holding on to an Anjak or something. Like if he didn't draw another creature to play, it could have been any creature. If not that, it would either be like an Evo, so he could be holding on to like a Hive Queen, which wouldn't be able to evolve on anything he top decks. It could be an Anjak, which could give him something to top deck into, but it ends up being just an Arbiter. And plays a kraken. So this is I think a spot I thought about for maybe a bit too long. The question is like, do I make this play, or given that he kind of showed a bit of weakness there, he is not, like, now I know for sure he's not holding an Anjak, because if he did have an Anjak in hand, he would have just won the game that turn. So it couldn't be Anjak. If it's a Hive Queen, again, it's a situation where he has no card that he can draw and evolve into right away with. So I know he's not like sitting on Anjak or Hive Queen, and he's already been through all 3 of these Blinder Beetle Primes. So I know it's very unlikely that he's actually sitting on an Evo that could actually kill me now the following turn. So because that's the case, you can make an argument that I should sort of maybe sit back and wait an extra turn just to see if I can find a creature. I like let him draw a pass, maybe next turn try to find maybe something like a Lyra off the top of my deck. I could just wait one more turn, and that way if I wait one more turn to find a creature, then I can kind of guarantee game through either an Arbiter or a Salvation Reckoner. Not both, but I could win the game through either one of those, which is just a marginal thing. But given that he's shown so much weakness and really can't assemble a win next turn, I feel like that was something worth thinking about. And I certainly thought about it, but I don't know, my brain was, I think in hindsight, it may have been actually better to wait, given what I just kind of laid out there. But I didn't really process all of that information at the moment. So I ended up thinking about it and just kind of decided, like, as I talked about, a lot of these situations where you're debating going in or not, you should probably just go in, because however scared you are, the odds are probably in your favor. And I think I ended up doing the math after, and I think it was, 70% that he doesn't have an Arbiter and Shields, not counting obviously the one that I see in hand now. But if you had 2 Arbiters somewhere in these 20, I think it was a little bit higher than 70%, which is good. But if I waited maybe an extra turn just to draw, I could have probably afforded to do that, and I could have taken that guaranteed extra draw. If I do draw something like if I don't draw something relevant like a Lyra, I can just play Mark of Kalima, blow up whatever he played, even if it was a blocker, and then I could make the same decision I made now, and then I could even run it back another turn. I could maybe buy myself a couple draws. That said, it gets to like a weird territory where he may be like, at some point it may be more likely that he's holding an Anjak. I don't know. It gets really sketchy, but I could have probably afforded to wait one extra turn, or wait an extra turn to draw a creature, but that means like waiting 2 extra turns basically, like trying to draw a creature. He ends up having the Salvation Reckoner, but he does not have the Arbiter, so I end up winning the game there. But again, I think the big thing for me there was trying to decide, should I afford to wait a turn, which is, I mean, not really, again, it's not really waiting a turn, it's kind of waiting 2 turns. But yeah, the odds are in my favor for sure. So yeah, that was a good, very tight first game. I made a few kind of sequencing errors and some issues with my mana development, and I think some of the play choices I made in the early game. But I think he made a couple of the bigger errors that tilted the game in my favor overall. So yeah, definitely a tightly contested matchup here. So I think going into game 2, I believe K-Rick opted to go first again. And my hand is not looking too great. I'm really looking for like Mesmerize and Spire Puppet in these kind of matchups, just trying to take my opponent off of resources, especially when I'm going second. So play the Stingwing. I guess it makes sense, just develop the Light Dark card. I have a couple other options as blockers. From his hand, he plays a Shield Wing, makes sense. And I feel like I would either mana one of the Gloom Hollows or one of the Skull Cutters. Mana the Gloom Hollow and play one of the Skull Cutters. It's decent. Like, I really don't mind the trade of like him breaking a shield, giving me an extra card, and then being able to trade these creatures off. I think is something I'm totally happy with, and something that is kind of something that gives me an edge. So he kind of wisely decides not to make that attack. Because again, that's something I almost actively want him to do. So I play the Gloom Hollow. Maybe not necessary, but this is sort of kind of going to what I did in the previous matchup, which may have been a mistake, not casting the blocker when I needed to. And this is sort of the flip side, where this might be like I'm choosing to spend my mana now rather than later on this card, but it's not guaranteed that I actually ever want to cast this card. And previously I hedged on waiting, this time I hedged on playing it now. Not too sure about it. May have been better to play this Skull Cutter instead. It's another tight situation, and here the screeching draw is really good. Just clear that Shield Wing. And now I have a decent setup though. Like the Gloom Hollow does protect me from this. If he does have something like Blinder Beetle Prime, I'm kind of happy with how that might play out, where he maybe tries to clear the Skull Cutter, but then I get to trade one of these creatures for his Blinder Beetle Prime with this Shred main. So I can kind of, we trade 2 for 2, but again, those 2 for 2 trades are kind of to my advantage when I'm trying to lower him down on resources. But the Anjak with the Brood Mom in mana is just super scary. He attacks. I have the choice between chump blocking and taking the 2 shields, and it seems pretty straightforward that I would take the extra cards here. And here, I believe I elect to cast a Shred main and just give this Screeching Slayer and slay the Anjak. In hindsight, I'm not actually sure this is a good play. I think it may have been better maybe to not cast this card. Maybe just cast it and not do anything with it. If I wanted to build up my board, it may have been better to just play it on his turn. Let him run back the kind of, like he's only down to 1 card in hand. I could let him run back the same attack next turn. And then again take the 2 shields, or even chump block maybe. But I could debate between chumping at that point or taking the 2 shields, and then following that up with Lyra on the Anjak. I think that might have been a much stronger line where I can tap this thing down, especially keeping this Screeching in play. I'd have 4 creatures, and I could just make a big push on his shields with the Lyra. Try to turn the corner very fast, given that he's gone all in on this really solitary threat. Rather than trying to answer it when he has this Broodmother, I could have tried to kind of avoid the issue altogether and just build up a board and play Lyra and translate my board presence into a victory, rather than trying to use my board to grind his board down. I could have just used it to actually win the game. So I think that certainly may have been a better line in hindsight. I think I considered it briefly, but I didn't really give it enough thought at the time when I was playing. But in hindsight, it looks like that may have been a better option. Because yeah, like it's just so much card advantage from him, and it's just so hard for me to keep up with these cards here that I'm playing. I think I just needed to play for that Lyra. See how this progresses. He draws another Anjac, so he gets to run it back if he wants to. He could also play the Hive Queen. It's just he's got a lot of stuff going on. In the face of this Lurking Skullcutter, it makes sense that he would want to use the Anjac. Even if I am able to stabilize somewhat, he's got this Blinder Beetle Prime that he can play towards to break through whatever I can assemble. So yeah, in hindsight, like he would have just drawn that or he would have drawn like a Blinder Beetle Prime or a Manatic with the tapped Anjac. I don't know. I felt like it would have been probably way stronger. And I think what I end up doing is I think I end up making that play now. Yeah, I make the play anyways on this Anjac, but that's after he's had another turn to develop his hand with mana, draw like 2 additional cards, and I have 1 less body. Like I could have made this play with having an extra creature and him being down these 2 full cards. So he would have been in a much worse place to respond, because now he can draw so many more combinations of cards. Like if he just draws Stratus Beetle, he can play like this hasty Hive Queen. If he draws like even like something like a Swordhorn, like a 3-drop Enforcer, he can play that along for a hasty Blinder Beetle Prime. There's just so many more combinations, given that he was able to get those 2 extra cards. That said, like I would still give him a bunch of cards out of shields, but it just feels like he wouldn't have been able to develop his mana in the same way. And I would have, again, just been up that full other creature. So I think that was probably, I don't know. It's hard to kind of evaluate, but I think that was probably a mistake. But given that I'm down so many cards, I'm just kind of making the same play. So I hit a Crickant, which is just kind of sad for me. Now I'm in a spot where I'm not really sure what to do. I'm kind of at a loss. I feel like my plan was kind of all jumbled up. I end up just deciding to try to break just a bunch of shields anyways. Just try to Hail Mary. Hope that I can get there with this with these Lyras. Like hopefully maybe I have like a Bone Blades or a Terror Pit or something relevant in shields, and then I can untap with this Lyra. Yeah. Not really sure if this is the correct play, but I think it's almost necessitated in this position. It may have even been, I think it probably would have been correct to just swing with this Gloom Hollow. I think I considered it for a little bit, and I opted not to, but I think if I'm going that way, I need to break as many shields as I can. This blocker's not accomplishing much, given that I know that he has Blinder Beetle Prime. So if he is able to find an Enforcer, these blockers aren't going to be relevant. I mean, maybe that's an overstatement. Like again, he could just have like a hasty Hive Queen. And again, and I'm also just going to be, like if he has any Shield Blast creature, especially Arbiter, I'm pretty much toast this game no matter what. So I think it was probably right to break this extra shield. Not confident, but probably was correct to just go for it. Um, so he attacks. And we'll see what he gets. A Rain Cloud Kraken. So not the most relevant card, but it does kind of protect him from this lurking Skull Cutter. I forget what he attacked as well. I don't know if he indicated what he was attacking. I would imagine probably the Skull Cutter. And then, yeah, so I know I have this Bone Blades, which can clear the Rain Cloud Kraken. Oh, he attacks my shield. I believe I chump block. But that's kind of a tough choice as well. I'm just kind of hoping this is a Terror Pit that can maybe save me in a spot where the game is really tight. At a more relevant position than this, where the Terror Pit and shields is not going to be good. So I'm electing to translate the body. Given at this point, like, I mean, this is a spot where if I had just broken that extra shield the previous turn, in this position, like maybe he would have probably been more prone to just attacking one of these creatures and leaving me with the 4 breaks anyways, but that 4 breaks with the Bone Blades in hand, like I could have won the game. Like especially if I had kept that extra body from earlier, and yeah, I'm just really I don't know why I would block there actually. Like if I just hadn't chump blocked, even going back further, if I hadn't played my Screeching, I think I tunnel vision on protecting myself here, when my best chance to win the game was honestly just to cast this Bone Blades on his Rain Cloud Kraken and just, I mean, I have enough breaks here to go for game. From his perspective, to prevent that, he probably should have forced my block by attacking one of my creatures. But then I kind of counter punted by not blocking, or by choosing to block. So I really kind of threw away my one chance there by not playing to that win. But again, that goes, I think, 2 factors that kind of played into that whole kind of mistake, where maybe not attacking with the Gloom Hollow on the previous turn, and even going back further, not taking that different line where I end up leaving the Screeching in play and just saving a Lyra for the Anjak hit, or for the Anjak the following turn. So I think a bunch of mistakes kind of went into this loss on my part, where I sort of navigated the game a little poorly, and I certainly was too tunnel vision on protecting myself, even though I had clearly indicated that I was conscious of trying to turn the corner and win the game. In that particular moment, I certainly tunnel vision on protecting myself, as opposed to being cognizant of how I was going to be probably most likely to actually win. So now, like, what ended up happening is I just sort of simplified the board state, and I'm just really looks like I'm playing not to lose at this point. I mean, that's kind of what happens when you're getting beat down so badly. It's you kind of get in that mindset where you're sort of forced to just look for your way out, rather than I don't know, rather than looking for the way to win. So, I mean, he's got 2 more creatures, and yeah, it's just looking like it would have just been so much more productive to have just not blocked, try to go for game. And I mean, this Baelgor is looking like it might be more relevant to something that I can actually play towards. If I'm able to stabilize enough, I might be able to set up the Baelgor. But it's looking really tough here. Hmm. I'm pretty sure I just saw him get the winning card, so I'm not sure why. I typically don't play it out like that, but maybe I just kind of forgot for a second what he drew. But yeah, he has a Salvation Reckoner for sure to tap one of my blockers, and then he has the 2 creatures to go for game. So that was another incredibly close game. I certainly had a lot of opportunity to play that better, and I could have maybe snuck out a win in that match. But yeah, 2 very close games. Um, Super well contested. I think this time the mistakes were primarily on my end. Um, so yeah, we'll jump into the final game here. Um, Definitely a longer matchup than some of the other ones I've posted so far, but we'll see how this one develops. I believe there was a bit of a gap. Yeah, so my opening hand, I elect to go the Stingwing. I'm probably more inclined to cast this Targusher than the Stingwing. And this Snake Trap I'd rather have line up on one of the Megabugs or something like that. His hand, he's got the Handjack, he's got Manathic, he's got a lot of good stuff in here. And I believe there was actually a break, so I'll just skip through that. Okay. So I played the Queen Kalima, which makes a fair amount of sense. I decide not to play this Skull Cutter, hold on to it. I'm not sure if I'm going to need both of these Slayers, and I'd rather have the Targusher in play, I suppose. Kind of a weird spot. I don't know if maybe it would have been better to play this Targusher there. I'm not sure. And in this spot, I draw, and I think I'm inclined to actually play this Snake Trap. Okay, this play makes no sense. I thought this is what I did. But yeah, that play makes literally no sense. That was just a blatant mistake. Um, Obviously, if I'm going to be putting one of these cards in mana and casting the other one, I should be casting the better card. So this is probably a mistake where I kind of got in my head about how I was planning to sequence. And I remember kind of deliberating how I was going to sequence this multi-civ in. And I figured, I might as well just do it now. And then I didn't really do the kind of final calculation of, okay, well, if I want to play one of these Slayers, I'll just play the better one. Um, so yeah, I think what I wanted to do was Snake Trap, but then I was worried about if I Snake Trap now, I'm gonna have to put this Skull Cutter in mana, and then I may not be able to guarantee that I can cast this Spire Puppet the following turn because I'm holding on to this multi-civ. So I'll just get rid of this multi-civ now and put it in mana so that I can guarantee maybe casting the Spire Puppet or the Snake Trap next turn. Or like at least guarantee being able to cast a Spire Puppet if I want to next turn. But then, obviously that doesn't really make sense because I could just cast a Targusher and put this down. So I think in hindsight, probably the best play was just to cast maybe the Snake Trap anyways. Not 100% positive on that. But certainly I should have played this Targusher instead of the Lurking Skullcutter. Just kind of a blatant error there, in where I was sort of caught up in my thought about how I was planning to sequence, that I just made it just a clear oversight after I came to a conclusion. So he Manatix, obviously just opting over the Swordhorn, which makes sense. Yeah, I mean his deck really doesn't have any 4-drops anyways, so you're not really sure. You're not really going to get punished for holding on to the multi-civ here. And he finds a Homunculon, which is another high power card, and certainly a card that could potentially punish me for electing to use a Skull Cutter instead of the Targusher. I mean, not really electing, just making the oversight. But I kind of get rewarded. So he makes the attack that I kind of talked about in the previous game. it's kind of interesting. He elected not to do it when he was playing the previous game, but he elected to do so this time. So I'm wondering what might have changed in his thought process. But it ended up kind of bailing me out for the mistake I made with the Targusher, where I'm not going to have to worry about how much better this card would be in the late game because it's just going to trade off. I would have just traded off with either one. Or likely. Actually, maybe that's not the case. It may be more likely that I would have kept this around and Bone Blades, or used my removal on this instead. Or this instead and then kept the Targusher around. It might have changed my play. Regardless, I'm just going to Snake Trap, saving the Bone Blades for something like a Swordhorn anyways, and trading off. Like I said though, if I had kept the Targusher, I might have been inclined to play a removal spell on the... I'm not sure though. Maybe not. I think it's fine actually just to clear all the resources there. But the problem now is I'm kind of down a full card because of how powerful Manitic is. So honestly, I think that play might be an oversight as well. I think given that I made the misplay of playing Skullcutter instead of Targusher, I was sort of forced into that play. Had I played the Targusher, I probably should have just Snake Trapped the Luminous Shieldwing, and then just kept the Targusher as a card that can really defend me against the Evos. So yeah, that was kind of a misplay, I think, because it's tough to fight on the axis of card advantage when they have more cards than you, right? So I think that was a kind of a misplay brought on by the original misplay that I made. Again, kind of a lot of marginal stuff there, but certainly things to look out for. Oh. So they just developed their board. I play Spire Puppet. Makes sense. I hit the Homunculon. Interesting. Okay. So from here, put the Kalima down. This is kind of... I'm already 2 Kalimas down, and I lost my Baelgor, so I'm really losing a lot of my top end here. It may have been better to try to hold on to these Kalima so that my marks are a lot better if I draw into those. But that said, these are pretty strong top end-ish cards anyways. So of course I Bone Blades the... I think this was another mistake. I don't know. This was another situation. I feel like I was just not playing super well this match. This was another situation where I could have just cast a Lyra and tapped the Stratus Beetle and attacked it with this Spire Puppet, and I would have been able to develop this big double breaker. For some reason, in my head, I was like, well, if I Lyra tap the Stratus Beetle, if he just evolves an Anjac onto it while it's tapped, I'd rather just kill the Stratus Beetle rather than have it Lyra tapped. But for some reason, I didn't do the next step in my head of just attack the Stratus Beetle with my Spire Puppet. So I was a complete kind of space out where I could have developed this extra double breaker. Maybe you argue that it's probably worth holding on to, but that certainly wasn't my thought process. My thought process was, wow, I don't want to have him be able to evolve like an Anjac onto his tapped Stratus Beetle. So I'm just going to kill it outright, which was just kind of... I may have come to the right conclusion by accident through that logic, but the thought process was certainly flawed there. Oh no. Okay, just ignore everything you saw there. So we're developing. Okay. Apologies for that kind of mistake there. Hopefully there were no spoilers. But yeah, I think overall, this may be a mistake. Maybe it's like it was better to hold this Lyra to answer an Evo that comes down. Um, I don't know. Maybe it ends up being better in the long term, but it was certainly wasn't intended to be that way. The thought process was certainly flawed. But here ends up like again, I just don't really get punished for it. I think that's the thing. I've made a few errors this match, but I haven't really gotten punished for them, or this game especially. I certainly got punished in the previous game for my errors, but in this game not so much. Just given that he's kind of bricked off on a few extra evos and these kind of shield blasty creatures. And he plays Manitic. So he's got a pretty strong hand, but he just has to kind of keep this bait alive on the board. Now I untap. And just kind of without thinking, I just sort of drop the Trox and immediately attack. So, I mean, I guess it makes sense. Like, I have to attack, and I forget if I end up attacking. I decide not to. So, I could have chosen to just attack the two Luminous Shield Wings here, but I suppose I figured it's best to try to get like an Arbiter or something out of the way as soon as possible. Especially on this board where it's not the biggest. I have 3 shields. If he has a Sasha, I'm completely blown out. But at the very least, I might have this blocker to stabilize me. But again, Sasha is going to be super hard to beat. He may end up making the wrong mistake if he had a Sasha by attacking this Trox again. But I don't know. Like, again, you kind of maybe it's a mistake that I'm playing it so aggressively, but in this game specifically, like, I already am really low on these big bombs anyways. So I feel like I have to make this switch, and I get kind of lucky that or maybe it's lucky, maybe it's not, but either way, I'm kind of happy that he ends up not having the Sasha. But yeah, I feel like it's a problem with this Kalima deck where a lot of the time you're just kind of forced. It feels almost forced that I'm kind of having to make these kind of bad looking plays. Uh-oh. Okay. Hopefully this doesn't impact anything. We'll just leave that way off to the side there. It looks like the replay is still progressing. So, it looks like I'm thinking if this is kind of another tricky spot where I need to decide how I want to approach this. And I think what I ended up deciding was, actually I forget what I decided, honestly. This is still a kind of tough spot. I can certainly like kill both of his creatures by terror pitting and attacking one with a Lyra, and then I could maybe Trox double break. But the problem with that, and like break these 2 shield wings that I know are not going to be anything, or even just 2 fresh seals. But I felt like, I think the problem with that was I really needed the body to actually win the game. Oh. That's kind of annoying. Oh, well. It's kind of scuffed, but we're going to run with this. Unfortunately, that had to happen. But I'm this deep into the recording, and the match is almost over anyway, so we'll just finish it out. So I end up deciding to make the play. of just discard the card, develop the blocker, and push in for the 2 shields. Again, the reason, so he still has 3 shields left underneath here. The reason that I decided not to Terra Pit and clear board was I just felt like, I mean, I believe from what he revealed that he probably has like an evolution plus a creature, and I just felt it was super necessary. Like, I wouldn't have been able to win the game if I cleared board and he just developed some big evolution, and then next turn he would have 3 shields to my 4 breaks, but it's 2 attacks, so I wouldn't be able to win the game. So it's just not a winning play in my opinion. So, or in my view, it just wouldn't be a winning line. So I need to develop this Spire Puppet so that I can have the way to actually win the game. So I can break those 2 Luminous Shield Wings, and then if he doesn't have a Shield Blast, I can break 2 shields and then break the 1, and then round out the game with enough attackers. So I think electing for just a Spire Puppet to have another attacker for the following turn was really important. Here, I feel like this was a mistake for sure by him. He should certainly have gone for this Hive Queen. I can't really, I forget. It's certainly unlikely that he's gone through all 3 homunculons. So being able to dig for a homunculon, he may have been able to pull this one out by spiking one of those and just breaking my last 2 shields, and then going for game with the Broodmom. But he didn't end up having one, or he didn't end up making that play. So I think that was a small play where he could have kind of played for the win there, or yeah, I think that was something he would have had to have done. And then on my end, obviously, again, he has 3 shields left. And oh, interesting. Oh, okay, no, I drew the Lyra, which made it way better for me. So drawing the Lyra there, answering the Broodmother, there's basically no way he can win the game. I don't think he has enough mana to play something and Sasha, if I remember. Unfortunately, we can't really check. Oh, and we see too, oh wow, he literally drew the homunculon. So if he had made the play for Hive Queen, if he had just evolved Hive Queen instead of that Kraken, he would have found the homunculon to tap my blocker, and he could have actually won the game. Of course, barring I had no Shield Blast. But he could have made that play. So that was a very close situation where he got punished for not playing the Hive Queen instead. But yeah, so drawing the kind of playing the Lyra there, I felt like was a way to kind of guarantee the win on the following turn, where I could keep the Anjak locked down, even if he had an evolution creature, like he wouldn't be able to win the game. And then this meant I could actually, I could beat a Salvation Reckoner as opposed to not being able to beat anything. I think the downside though was I didn't have really, or no, I drew this Terra Pit, I think. So yeah, maybe I might not have had a direct way to deal with a blocker. Like let's say he did play a Hive Queen to try to break my last shield, and he was able to dig for a Raincloud Kraken. I may not have actually been able to deal with the blocker to win the game. So it may have been a mistake to make. Who knows? Like, it's hard to say. Like playing around like a Salvation Reckoner is probably better than playing around a Raincloud Kraken that when one's already gone, that he could also potentially. Oh, that's another thing too. Even but aside from the homunculon, he could have also hit Salvation Reckoner. I forgot about that card. If he had evolved into the Hive Queen, he could have hit either a Salvation Reckoner or Homunculon the Blaster, which is even more outs to try to actually steal that game from me. But yeah, going back, if he was able to, it may have been better to play around. It probably would have been better to play around a Shield Blast Salvation Reckoner than play around a Raincloud Kraken that he can cast or get off of a Hive Queen, because I could always draw answers to the Raincloud Kraken, whereas if he has a a Salvation Reckoner, I'm just completely lost. So I think overall it's probably better to play around the Reckoner, which I did, and I ended up winning. Um, so yeah, uh, that was the match. Um, as always, I hope I'll get back to the screen here. As always, that was a super tight match between me and K-Rick. Of course, certainly some mistakes on both sides. I think the first game he made those two mistakes with the Sasha attack, and I believe I forget the other one off the top of my head. The Hive Queen, like the Mana Tick attack. He made a couple big mistakes that kind of cost him that first game. The second game I played, I think I just sequenced pretty poorly, and certainly kind of tunnel visioned at that one point. And I had a chance to win. Certainly wasn't guaranteed to win by no means, or by any means. If he had any kind of shield blast, I would have lost that game regardless. But I certainly had an opportunity that I didn't really seize. And then the third game was a game where I think I made a few mistakes as well, certainly. But I ended up just not getting punished for them. And then he had that one opportunity with the Hive Queen at the end there to try to close out the game that he didn't see. So a ton of room for improvement on both sides, and certainly a fun, super close match. That one of the great reasons to play Kaijudo. Just a great match there. So I hope everyone watching enjoyed that breakdown. Apologies about the end there with that pop-up. But yeah, I felt like I was too deep. I'd already sort of recorded one and got partway through when the same thing happened, and we were so close to the end there. I just figured I would finish it out. So yeah, as always, thank you for watching the video, and look out for more in the future.